When Samson was at Ramath-lehi, he was crying out to the Lord and complaining because he didn't have any water. Then God caused the ground to spring forth with water, and the name of that place was called En-Hakor, which means Caller's Spring. It's awesome the way when we call to God, He answers us. When we have needs, He provides for all of our needs. There's not one of our needs that goes unheard by His ears, even if we don't think our needs are being met. Our needs are always being met by God. It's only our wants that aren't always met. It's easy to confuse wants for needs. I don't need a wife and I don't need kids, but it'd be awesome if I had both. I don't need to live in a country where I'm free to worship the Lord, but I'm blessed that I live in this country because that freedom allows me to live without fear of retribution. I don't have to worry about prosecution. Even though there's areas of this country where people have been slapped with charges for proselytizing, there's nothing in the laws of our land that says you can't stand next to an abortion clinic and protest. There's nothing in the laws of our land that says you can't speak to somebody of another religion and ask them to change their religion. There's nothing in the laws of our land that says you can't preach the gospel to children. In all of our state school systems, in all of our state schools, they used to say the Lord's Prayer before they started their day. That still happens in some schools, but other schools outlawed it or phased it out. They tried to take out nativity scenes from our shopping centres and Christmas carol singing from our schools, but they didn't succeed. Plenty of schools still have carols by candlelight, and there's plenty of community events where people have carols by candlelight. It's even sponsored by the city that is our state capital. Channel 2 or ABC no longer has Christmas carols, but you can still find them on Channel 7, Channel 9. Used to have them on Channel 10, but they took them off, which is a pity. I'm grateful that we have freedom of religion and freedom of worship in this country. I like what Max Lucado said. Make me like the moon, so I reflect the sun. I want my life to be like that. I love his graphic descriptions of Jesus enduring the cross. It helps me to more fully comprehend what Jesus went through when he endured suffering for the sake of our redemption. There was a guy who was crucified for the sake of the world, but he didn't go through with it. He intended to be crucified for the sake of the world, but he didn't go through with it. There was a guy who killed himself for the sake of the environment. It's never a good thing to kill yourself. It's not a sin. Some people say if you say it's not a sin, then people are more likely to do it. But just because people are likely to use truth as an excuse to take their life in their own hands doesn't mean you should hide the truth from them. Jeremy Griffiths wrote a book about a Christmas camel. Our bishop was joking that his story must be a story from the Old Testament, not the New Testament, because in our church and in our belief system, we don't believe in having multiple husbands or multiple wives. Just one is enough for everybody. God's word does permit having multiple wives, but it discourages it at the same time by saying that you are supposed to love all of your husbands or all of your wives equally, and that's pretty much impossible. As humans, we're naturally prone to having favorites. It's almost impossible not to have a favorite something or other. I tried watching a soccer match once without picking sides, but by the middle of the game, I found myself just going with the winning team. Obviously, I couldn't be counted on to be a hardcore soccer fan. You would call me a fair weather friend when it comes to soccer. I'm the opposite of an acolyte or a devotee in regards to that particular sport. I have played before. I was possibly the worst asset imaginable you could have on a soccer team because I kicked a goal for the opposite team. I love dribbling my basketball in the tunnel between the oval and another bunch of buildings at school, but I never got picked for the basketball team, and I was never that good at handball, but I liked to play it. I sucked at playing tennis because you have to be really quick and throw the ball in the air and then hit it over the net. I've always sucked at bowling or 10-pin bowls, but I've always enjoyed doing it. I'm not that good at chess, but I love playing the game. I'm better off at drafts. I'm okay with Connect 4 and Scrabble and Tic-Tac-Toe. I like to play categories and Monopoly. I got my friends into Monopoly. They loved it so much that they bought their own set. Another of my friends' brothers bought a set, but I had no influence on their life. It's possible that they could have seen my friend playing and they wanted to have a set of their own, but I can't prove that. It's cool that my friend's daughter is into music. I hope that she takes up a career in singing. Just because you enjoy doing something doesn't mean you necessarily should have a career in it. Some people are better off just being commentators. Some people are better off just supporting those who do what they love. Some people might think that should be the case with me, because I'm able to connect people with other people who are able to help them in the hip-hop industry, but I haven't yet proven that I have the ability to be a contender myself. That doesn't stress me in the slightest. There's people who say I've got bars. There's people who say my bars are gems. And those people are people in the actual industry. So I don't really care about those people who think I'm a clan. I do care about their souls, but I don't care about their opinion, because I know their opinion isn't legitimate. One guy said my music sounds homemade. He doesn't have a clue because he hasn't been in my shoes. He didn't pay thousands of dollars to get an album recorded in Uganda. Just because it doesn't have a fancy cover, just because the cover of my album was designed on my old computer, doesn't make it any less legitimate than any album in the charts right now. I could be like Harper Lee and only make one good thing in my lifetime. Or, like she promised to do, because she said she was never going to make another book, but then she ended up releasing a second one just before she died. I'm not sure if her second book, To Set a Watchman, was as popular as To Kill a Mockingbird. Before I'd read that book, I wrote a poem called Tequila Mockingbird. I probably wouldn't have written it if I had read the book first, because I would be influenced by the book, and I couldn't write the same thing. Tomorrow I'm going to be seeing The Lion King, the newest version, at the cinema, so I'll probably be talking about that tomorrow. Anybody who doesn't watch this video will get a surprise when I talk about The Lion King. The rest of you will be in the know. You'll have the 411, but you don't have to keep it on the DL. If anybody has seen it, I don't care about spoilers. You don't need to issue a spoiler alert to me. I love hearing all the details of movies. I don't mind if you tell me all the details of books before I've read them, because I have so many books to read. It's unlikely I'll ever read all the books in the world, and I may not get to the books that you love. But if you tell me what they are, I possibly might get them at some point in time. I heard Jo Saxton is good, but I couldn't vouch for her. I just love the fact that she has a multicultural relationship. She and her husband have beautiful dark chocolate and milk chocolate babies. That's what I want my babies to look like. Maybe I'll change my mind if I actually get married and have children. But right now, that's what I want more than anything else in the world. One of my friends, he was a pastor in Papua New Guinea. He was criticized for playing sport. Some people said that you can't play sport and do ministry, but that's a lie from the pits of hell, because you can use sports as a ministry. God called him to marry outside of his culture, specifically a European lady. When I met him in 2007, he hadn't met that lady, but that doesn't mean he isn't going to meet her later in life. One guy did meet a European lady, and he was also from Papua New Guinea, and she has a ministry to prostitutes. Their relationship didn't last, but that doesn't mean there isn't hope for my friend. He was famous for being on Papua New Guinea Idol, and another one of my friends was one of the judges, but I met her on the other side of the country. It's a small world after all. He played a song by Michael Learns to Rock. I couldn't tell you what it is. And he also sang that NSYNC song, God Must Have Spent a Little More Time With You, which is a beautiful phrase, but it's terribly inaccurate theologically. Not that anybody that listens to NSYNC worries about the theological accuracy, but I'm sure there's some of us out there who do. I don't know about Justin Bieber's relationship with Jesus. I know Sierra, who he collaborated with, claims to have one. It's a pity she uses a word for a female dog on her album, but apart from that, there's no swears. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that anybody gets it. I just think it's good that she's living for God and she chose not to have sex before having marriage. She chose not to have sex before getting married. Britney Spears did the same thing. So did Devin Franklin and Megan Good. It's a pity that she doesn't feel comfortable in church. If you ever hear this, Megan, I want you to know that I'm sorry on behalf of the church. If anybody has caused you to feel pain, if anybody has caused you to feel rejection, if anybody has caused you to feel hated or judged instead of accepted and loved, I'm sorry. It takes time for wounds to heal. It's true what that guy who was interviewing her said. The church should be the place where you feel love. It should be the place where you feel peace. It shouldn't be a place where you feel hate and rejection. One guy got kicked out of church for asking questions. I don't know if he was asking questions in the middle of the service, but if it's a question and answer time, there should be nothing wrong with asking questions in church, regardless of what questions they are. Even if he's just being facetious, no pastor should be afraid of questions. It's okay to say I don't have the answers. Sometimes it's hard for us to admit that we're clueless. You can always say I'll get back to you later. There is a website called gotquestions.org which has a pretty thorough list of questions and answers. I found it to be helpful. John MacArthur has also helped, even though I don't agree with what he says about alcohol, because Jesus drank alcohol, as far as I know. At least I know he turned water into wine, so he didn't have anything against other people drinking alcohol. He was a Nazarite, so that meant he wouldn't have drank any grape juice, yet alone fermented grape juice, which is alcohol. We know that alcohol wasn't as alcoholic in those days. It wasn't as strong. So if he would have drank from the wine at the wedding feast in Cana, he wouldn't have gotten drunk. He does say, whoever takes this cup with me and dips the bread in the cup, he will be the betrayer. We don't know if Jesus had wine in his cup or something else, but we would just assume that he drank wine with his disciples at the Last Supper. I know he wouldn't have gotten drunk. I know he was always in control of his faculties. He had to be super careful because any sin in thought or deed would have forfeited his right to die for us. That's why it's a good thing that that guy who wanted to die for the world chose not to go through with it, because his death would have counted for nothing. I'm not sure what he achieved with his life. I know that he didn't know God, so he didn't die with joy and peace in his heart. We should never shake our fist at our Creator. We should always turn to God as our first port of call, not as our last resort. In Him we live and move and have our being. I'm so glad that Jesus lives in me. I love listening to the sound of the birds singing. I love looking at all the beautiful flowers in my garden. I love the fact that I've got passion fruit and cucumbers and lettuce and coriander and parsley. And soon I will have pumpkin from my garden, thanks to my diligent parents pulling out the weeds and giving the fruit and vegetables and flowers special growth supplements to help them grow and giving them plenty of water. Thank you, Lord, for the sunshine and the rain. Thank you, Lord, for your faithfulness. Thank you, Lord, for my friends that have liked my videos. It's good to have friends. My friends don't have to like my videos in order to be my friends. I don't like all of theirs, as in I don't hit the like button, but that doesn't mean I don't like what they do. Social media has made it awkward for us to have conversations that are accurate. You can talk about chatting to somebody, but you weren't really chatting. You were just using your fingers. My friend likes to say, I don't like talking with my mouth, I like talking with my fingers. That reminds me of the Yellow Pages. They used to say, let your fingers do the walking. They made life easier for people because it's hard to know what kind of business to pick for a certain service. Obviously, it's wrong that they have listings for escort agencies and prostitutes. It's crazy that prostitution is legal in our country. Our governments are hypocritical if they speak against sexually transmitted diseases while at the same time getting money from the prostitution industry. It's a shame that there are people who live in countries where drugs are available for sexually transmitted diseases and they're not getting to the people that need them because the people in charge of their country are given free drugs, but they sell them to the highest bidder. There is currently a lack of treatment available for those with gonorrhea. Lord, you can heal those people. There's no problem too big for you to deal with. There's nothing that you can't fix. You've been healing people for thousands of years. You can make the sun stand still. You can raise the dead to life. You can heal the blind and give them sight. You can cause the mute to speak. You can cause the deaf to hear. You can cause the lame to walk. You heal all kinds of mental diseases. You heal all problems with our bodies. There's nothing that's beyond your ability. I don't agree with those that say that it helps you if you have autism to take marijuana. Marijuana alters the brain cells of the person that uses it. I don't want anything to alter my brain cells apart from the miracle working power of Christ. Even if God chooses not to heal me, I will keep on loving Him because the preservation of my body matters less than the preservation of my soul. I don't always take God seriously enough. I don't always see my need to be pure in the things that I give hearts to on Instagram and the videos I watch on YouTube. It's easy to make excuses that I'm just supporting my friends when I see something that's dirty, when I see something that contradicts with what God loves. I want my life to be a reflection of His heart. I don't want to be fighting against Him. I want to be fighting for Him. I want to be on His team. I don't want to be on the enemy's team. I'm so grateful that He spilled His blood for me. God, I know You're there. I know You love me. I know You care for me. I know You answer my prayers. I know You're able to work miracles in every single life. I know You free us from trouble and strife. I know You bore those stripes for us. I know You wipe our sins clean. I know You're always helping us. When people hurt us, we don't have to stress because we've got You. We've got You to deal with our problems. We've got You to fix our problems for us. We've got You to help us. We've got You to heal us. We've got You to comfort us. It's true what my dad says. If you're stressed, just turn to Jesus. Perhaps you might need medication. Perhaps you might need psychologists and psychiatrists. Perhaps you might need to talk to a friend about your problems. But never put psychology or drugs above God. Never turn to self-help books before you turn to the good book. This one was designed by one of the singers in the worship band at our church. The cover says, Psalm 84:10, better is one day in Your courts than thousands elsewhere. On the back it says, in Your presence there is fullness of joy. Psalm 16:11. I can show you what it looks like, but it'll be back to front. It's hard to get a clear picture, but hopefully you get the gist. The words are fading, so I felt the need to record what it says, just in case I can't read it one day and I forget what it said originally. I love the fact that with fruit, God gives you a double blessing. You get to enjoy the beauty of the flowers, and then you get to enjoy the beautiful taste of the fruit. And of course, there's a triple blessing, because not only does it taste good, it also helps your body. Oh yes, and it's a quadruple blessing because when it rots and breaks down and decomposes, it's food for the plants around it. If your fruit comes from a tree, you get 5 blessings, because trees work with sun to create photosynthesis, which provides oxygen for us to breathe. We breathe out carbon dioxide and inhale oxygen. I don't know what the purpose is of carbon dioxide. God doesn't need us to exhale carbon dioxide in order to turn it into oxygen. He doesn't need our worship, but He loves it. He made us in order to worship Him. It's possible that there is miraculous power in our worship. I know that worship has the power to save a soul, because a heart that's fixed on Jesus is less likely to stray and be polluted by the world. When somebody does something for us, it's natural to say thank you. Often we don't have an attitude of gratitude when it comes to God. We'll get on our knees and beg Him for mercy, beg Him for forgiveness, beg Him for help when we're in dire straits, but when everything is good, when everything is hunky-dory, we don't necessarily think about the fact that we need Jesus for every single breath and every single heartbeat and every single brainwave and every single eye blink and every single movement of our jaw and every single inhalation through our nose and out through our mouth and every single operation of our eardrums and every single operation of our organs and muscles and every single movement of our bones. It's all because of God. When we lift our eyebrows and lower them, it's all because of God. We shouldn't take any of our movements for granted. It's only because He permits it that we are allowed to make any kind of physical movement. It's God's will that none should perish. If anybody dies, it's not something that God wants to happen. God is constantly at war with the devil. That's why I believe in limited sovereignty. God deliberately limited His sovereignty so we would be able to have some measure of free will. God controls when we die. That's indisputable. Even if we try and kill ourselves, God can step in and stop us from killing ourselves. God can step in and stop us from killing ourselves. Even if we try and kill somebody else, God can step in between us and the bullet that we aim at somebody else's head or heart. If we try to have sex with someone before we get married to them, God can step in between us and that person. God can cause our car to turn around like He did with my friend Moa. God can work in any life. There's nothing too big for Him. There's nothing that's too hard for Him. I love the way God gave the birds such a great variety of songs. I wish I knew what they were saying to each other. I wonder if they're insulting me or if they're complimenting me. I'm sure they don't even think about me except when I come to give them food. Mum's got a vendetta against all the birds that aren't magpies. When we get ibises or butcher birds in our yard, or miners, she chases them away, but she's the defender of the magpie. I don't like magpies because once one pecked me in the cheek when I was walking down the street doing door-to-door collections for bowel cancer and my cheek bled. Some people say you can get rid of magpies if you wear a hat with eyes on it, or if you wear an ice cream bucket on your head, but that's an urban myth. People who say that just want to see you look like a hooligan. It's crazy that they have hoon laws. I think it's stupid that you can get into trouble with the cops for seeing who let the dogs out at the top of your lungs at 3 a.m. Fair enough if you're swinging punches at people and making life a living hell for them. But if you're just singing, there's no reason why you should spend the night in the lockup. It's crazy that my friend Jim spent the night in the lockup when abortion was still illegal in this state because he spread his body across the door and stopped somebody from killing their baby in an abortion clinic. It's crazy that a woman got away with importing the drug IU486 when it was still illegal in this state. This drug kills babies in the womb. It's crazy that our state made abortion legal when on a federal level it's illegal, and it's legal in Victoria too. I wish every state made prostitution and abortion illegal. We can always turn the clock back. Some things aren't meant to be changed. Some things are meant to stay the same. We live in a world where a rugby player's social media posts get him banned from playing rugby. We live in a world where the women's soccer team for America kicked out a player just because she was a Christian. This was the Lauren Daigle kind of Christian. Someone that doesn't say anything to upset anybody, but they still have heat directed towards them. They still have hate bombs directed towards them simply because Jesus lives in their heart. This is the world we're living in, people. I'm so glad that I've got friends who believe that we can happily coexist if we don't share the same opinions or beliefs. Obviously, there's some things we don't talk about. I don't go and talk about sexuality to all of my friends, and I don't talk about religion to all of my friends. But I can talk about love. I can talk about our need for healing. I can talk about our need for answers to prayers. I can talk about the beauty of the universe and the fact that its beauty speaks of an author. It whispers intelligent designer. If I take bits of Lego and toss them in the air, they're not going to randomly form into a Lego-shaped planet, are they? That's what people think happened with the Big Bang. How ludicrous is it? It takes a lot of faith to believe in that. Obviously, belief in evolution is a religion. Recently, children were surveyed in primary schools in the UK, and the majority of them said that they believe in God. This wasn't in a Christian school. This was in a secular learning institution. I went to a church school. It was thanks to their generosity that we were able to get a discount on the price of the education for my sister and I. One kid brought a cannabis leaf to school and he got kicked out. I guess they should have been more gracious with him. Originally, when I started at my school, no divorce teacher could teach there. Then later on they changed the rules. My home economics teacher was a divorcee. The first principal I had was a woman. Some people don't think that women should be in any kind of authority. Some people don't think that women should be in any kind of authoritative position, but I disagree. It wasn't that our Prime Minister was a woman that was a problem. It was the fact that she was living in sin and she doesn't believe in God. If a country doesn't have a Christian leader, it's easy for people to think that because the leader isn't following God, then they shouldn't follow God either. That's what happened in hip-hop when Lecrae said that he's not a Christian rapper, he's just a rapper who's Christian. Some people thought, if my leader and my hero doesn't want to call himself a Christian rapper, then why should I call myself a Christian? It's not his fault that they made that choice. He didn't stick a gun to their heads and say, you have to bow down and worship the devil, you have to give up on Jesus because I'm not calling myself a Christian rapper anymore. But this is the fallout. This is what happens when you sit on the fence, when you compromise your convictions. At least he's still got KB working for him. Even though KB raps about money, he still raps that drugs are bad. And he still raps about Jesus. Even though he raps about the zodiac, it's not like he's saying that the zodiac is a good thing. And he's not talking about his star sign or anything like that. I believe it is a dodgy choice to mention the zodiac and to have references to Black Panther, unless you're saying that it's a bad movie. Obviously I can't talk because I made a reference to it today. Hopefully people know by my track record where I stand when it comes to movies that swear. But you can't guarantee, unless you explain that you don't intend to promote swearing, that people know that it's something you should avoid. I've liked churches on Facebook who have talked about Black Panther without necessarily saying that it's a bad movie. I just like their worship. I don't necessarily agree with everything they say. They say Happy Turkey Day instead of Happy Thanksgiving. I think we should be proud of Thanksgiving, not because it's something that pilgrims and Native Americans should celebrate exclusively, but everybody has something to be thankful for every single day of their lives. Unlike that Wizard song, I wish it could be Christmas every day. I wish we could all live in joy and peace every day. I wish everybody got along with each other. I wish everybody agreed with each other. I wish we did have some kind of a mass consciousness where we never had to fight. It's mainly greed that inspires war. If we were all happy living in our own lands, then we wouldn't have anybody trying to take over other countries. If people only went overseas to spread the gospel, it wouldn't be a problem. Just because missionaries were followed by people taking over countries and colonizing them doesn't mean that they worked hand in hand with each other. There were some missionaries that were backwards in their thinking and thought that people had to wear clothes in order to be Christians. or they thought that you had to dress like a European and sing European songs, or sing in English, or paint in a European style in order to be a Christian, but obviously that isn't true. European culture isn't a bad thing, but it's not superior or inferior to any other culture. In European culture, we have a history of worshipping devils and being superstitious, giving names to devils or mythical creatures. Perhaps some of these so-called mythical creatures that we accuse of mischief are actually devils. In some cases it's just pure hogwash and people are looking for excuses, like when the little kid is asked by his parents who stole the cookies and they say, "Mr. Nobody did it." But in other cases there is genuine mischief that takes place that the devil is responsible for. The devil can make people sick. In some cases we get sick because of what we eat or what we drink, or a lack of sleep. Sometimes we just get sick because we act foolishly. Sometimes we get hurt because we do stupid things, like lying on the middle of the road waiting for cars to run us over, or we ride in the wrong lane on our bike. We ride in the lane where the cars are supposed to be instead of the bicycle lane. Some people have death wishes. Some people will tip eggs on the floor at Woolworths and slide a bait on the eggs so they crack a bone, so Woolworths pays money for their repairs. Most people aren't that stupid. One of my friends works in the legal department for Woolworths, so he has to deal with cases all the time where people try to deliberately injure themselves in order to gain money. The fact that we have stupid warnings on products, like if washing powder says do not ingest or do not eat, the reason they have that is because some stupid person who wanted to make money has deliberately swallowed it just so they can get a cash settlement. There are people that make a living out of doing these kinds of things, but thank God that they don't include the majority of people on this planet. I love gospel gangsters because when they first started out, they were gangsters, but then they gave their lives completely to Jesus. Some people just talk about the gangster life, but they never actually were gangsters. Rick Ross is one of those people. He was a CEO for a company, then he just became a rapper, and he talked about dealing drugs. 50 Cent took his name from an actual gangster. I don't know if he really was a gangster. It doesn't really matter one way or the other. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. For lack of vision, people perish. That last verse was one that was often quoted by the dead father of my ex. I prayed for him to be healed, but it didn't happen. He got radiation treatment in Western Australia with a controversial figure called Dr. Holt. He and my ex got locked out of the apartment they were staying in when they were over there. Some people think that there's this big conspiracy going that the Cancer Council just exists to make money out of people and they're hiding the cure to cancer. But that's ludicrous because the cancer gene mutates all the time. If you slip, slop and slap, you're more likely to avoid getting skin cancer. Some people have moles and they think they're melanomas, but they're just moles. It's a good idea to get regularly checked for breast cancer or skin cancer. Some people complain about their relatives dying and their relatives never went to the doctor. My response to them is, what do you expect? John G. Lake never took any medicine. Maybe that's something God's calling you to do. Everybody's life is different. Some people will never have to take medicine. Others will have to take it. If I don't take asthma medication, I lose oxygen. If I do it for a few days, I can only go 3 days without food and water. Without food. Oh, I've gone up to 5 days before. I've gone up to 5 days where I was just skipping lunch. I tried to do a 40-day fast, but I just ended up blacking out. It was probably the heat as well, because I was in a hot kitchen, sweating up a storm, and I was clinging onto the counter before I blacked out. Obviously, I don't remember blacking out. The doctor clearly didn't believe in angels and devils because I was talking to him about God, and he just seemed completely closed off. My friend got put in a mental asylum because she said she could hear voices. Some people say they can see colors on people or auras. One little girl told me when I went to the psychologist that she sees blood on people's foreheads, but she didn't see any on mine. The first question they ask you when you go to the psychologist is if you ever want to kill people. If your answer is yes, then they don't treat you because they consider you to be too dangerous. I'm not sure if they would have sent me to the psychiatric ward if I had admitted to occasionally thinking about killing people. I'm sure it's occurred to everybody at some point in time. Thank God that we don't get prosecuted in heaven for our murderous... Well, actually, we do get prosecuted in heaven for our murderous intentions, but we don't get prosecuted on earth for it. You can't be charged for a thought crime. Jesus said if you think about having sex with a woman, it's the same as actually having sex with her in real life. You know, if you thought, I want to have sex with a woman, if you agree with the devil when he tries to plant that thought in your ear. He can be so sneaky, he tries to disguise his thoughts as our thoughts. It's possible to differentiate your voice from his voice and your voice from God's voice. You know when you agree with God's voice. Your voice should sound like God's voice because that's how we were originally designed, to be a reflection of God. We are born into sin. That's why sin sounds more natural to us than the voice of God. We know the consequences of sin. It's an easy road to travel on, but it's a road that leads to destruction. Christianity is a hard road, that's why. It's for everyone, but not everyone chooses to be a Christian. When the word of God says many are called but few are chosen, it doesn't mean that some people are destined not to be Christians. It means that few will choose to be Christians, or less will choose to be Christians than choose not to follow God. It also says, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, and they will not enter the kingdom of heaven. When they say Lord, Lord, it means, I call you boss. I give all authority to you. I completely submit myself to you. If you haven't done that, if you aren't constantly searching your heart and seeing if there's any sin in it and asking God to remove it from you, then you're in danger of hellfire. We should be afraid of the judgment of God. We should be afraid of the wrath of God. At the same time, we should be conscious of the love of God and His ability to forgive us. We shouldn't be so full of fear and so full of resentment at God's rules that it keeps us from loving Him. He is the source of our peace. We can't have peace if we don't have Christ. We can't have hope if we don't have Christ. We can't have life if we don't have Christ. We can't have life beyond the grave if we don't have Christ. One newspaper columnist, Mike O'Connor, considered it cheating to have sex in the game Second Life. I agree with him, because even though he wasn't being asked to physically cheat on his partner, he still would have been making a spiritual bond with her. I'm not sure if he made that connection though. I agree with what he said, that they should change the laws for priests so they're able to get married, because they have kept the laws in place that has allowed for pedophilia to take place and exploitation of women and children. Originally this was put in place because lots of babies would get aborted because priests would have sex with women, and that's why they put confessional booths in place, to protect the parishioner from the priest. It wasn't the other way around. There's a salty book about Charity Churchmouse. She starts off singing about Jesus, then she gets egotistical and starts singing about herself instead. There's a Kenneth Copeland song about a woman named Rosanna from the state of Louisiana, who starts out singing for God, then she ends up singing about herself. I never want to be like that woman. It's easy to become egotistical, to become so full of yourself that you've got no time for anybody else. I never want to be like that. I always want to be loving to people, even if they're not loving to me. I know I don't always respond in the best way when I'm being insulted, but I'm learning to turn the other cheek. I'm learning to pick the road of humility instead of arrogance. I'm learning to take a step back and think to myself, is there anything I could do better? Is there a way I can present what I do in a way that doesn't make people sick to their stomachs and still be myself? Obviously I make mistakes. Obviously I'm not perfect. Nobody walking this earth's surface is. Yes, Sean Carter, I just quoted you. So if this video was monetized, I would have to pay you money. But it's not, so I don't have to pay you a red cent. It'd be cool if you actually watched this video. But I can live with the fact that he may not. I wish he changed his attitude about Jewish people. I'm sure some of his fans are Jews. I'm a possible Jew. And a definite fan. Peace out!